So I know you are an expert on this whole idea of Hebrew Israelites, and would you just tell us a little bit what or who are the Hebrew Israelites?
The black Hebrew Israelites. They believe blacks are the true descendants of the biblical Israelites. Is there a problem right now with the black Israelites? Are they angry at something specific? What's the beef?
So where do black Hebrew Israelites get this idea that they are the true Jews or true descendants of the lost tribes of Israel?
Some Hebrew Israelite folks who are doing some passionate discussion, doing some passionate preaching, some black Hebrew Israelites in Times Square.
We recognized them right away that they were the black Hebrew Israelites. They see themselves as the real true Israelites, the real Jews, and everybody else is just imitators.
Religions in this series, and today we want to focus on the black Hebrew Israelites. Now, this is an area where few churches or apologetics ministries really go, and for most people who are outside the African American community, we don't really hear much about it. It's not really on the radar for a lot of people, but some of my African American friends tell me they can't hardly go to get their haircut without someone trying to recruit them. How would you describe the worldview of the black Hebrew Israelites for those of us who have no clue what this is about?
The key element is we are the true biblical Israelites by blood. That's the key element. It drives everything.
Now, how new is this movement? Is it an African American movement, or was it before America? Now, how does this worldview explain, if I can say, actual Jews and Judaism?
Well, I have never met, maybe they exist, anyone who calls themselves a Hebrew Israelite that does not think so-called, this is their terminology, modern day Jews are actually frauds. They're ethnic and religious imposters. A Hebrew Israelite would say, it's my culture, I'm simply reclaiming it. So they believe it's reclaiming a lost heritage. They believe that the Bible predicts that. They would say they're recovering their culture. And so what here it would say is they would say that pastors have lied to us. They have not told us our true identity. We are the people written about in this book and who wrote this book. And yet we've been told we're down here. In reality, we're up here. And now that I know who I am, I realize one of the key ways that I express my culture is by keeping the Old Testament law as well as I can. And so they would say, those folks are the wannabes, the so-called real Jews, they would say. We're the true ones taking it back. And you'll hear them say things like, the day I woke up or the day I came into this truth, it was like I got a golden ticket. It was like I had won the lottery. I still remember the feeling when a guy told me I was an Israelite, how I was on the bus on the way home, how excited I was. That's the kind of thing you hear. It's almost them being born again. I'm not saying it actually is, of course, but they talk about it as waking up. Maybe I should open with this. Hebrew Israelism is growing, and there's data that indicates it's over 1.5 million in the United States that identify as a Hebrew Israelite. And it was 4% of those surveyed. Sample size was around 1,100. If you extrapolate the 4% out to Black America as a whole, it's 1.8 million or so. That you would end up with a number who identify. That doesn't mean they're out there in a corner every Saturday. It doesn't mean they even go online, but it means at least the ideological element. And that's a problem. So it's growing, not shrinking. The best thing to learn how to do in regards to Bible study, in regards to Hebrew Israelism, is this: learn the New Testament use of the Old Testament. Find out when it happens, find out how it happens, find out what it means, get some basic understanding of how the passages that are used, what their original context was.
We're going to talk about Hebrew Israelites, something that I don't know anything about. So tell me what it is.
People who are thought to be African descendants in the Western Hemisphere are actually the true Israelites spoken of in the Bible.
So would that exclude like someone like me who has no African heritage? Well, not any recent African heritage.
If your ancestors were slaves, it's not it sort of doesn't feel very noble to basically have your history start with slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the way things have been portrayed or how they're perceived. This jumps past that and gives people a grand history that is actually in the Bible, which it's sort of an upend, because the Bible for a long time has been the most important book within Western civilization.
Yeah.
And what this ends up doing is saying, hey, you people in Western civilization that have hated us and mistreated us during the transatlantic slave trade, the book you cherish is actually all about us. And identity formation and completion are very important. And so when people look at this and they say, no one should take that serious, you can never discount the power of identity formation and completion.
Okay, so I've identified at least two different claims that they're making. The first one is theological. They're talking about the Gentiles are sort of excluded from the pool or from the possibility of salvation.
Yeah.
But then also there's this empirical claim that the Hebrew Israelites, or this group, whatever, however you want to identify them, are descended from the line of Jacob, right? And that seems like an empirical thing that we could kind of look at ancestry and figure out. So how do you go about addressing those two different claims?
South Africa and Zimbabwe is home to a group of people called the Limba. The Limba, especially within the male priestly clan, have demonstrated not only through their oral history, but by genetic testing, to have DNA that can be traced back to the Levant, meaning Semitic, meaning highly likely their ancestors were Israelites. And interestingly enough, most of them are Christian as far as their religious practice these days. Few things about that. They're not where the transatlantic slave trade happened. You know, that's the West Coast, that's the Ivory Coast. It's a different area of the continent of Africa. So it's irrelevant really to any kind of claim. And it's a small people group within the continent itself. So it's not impossible through the dispersion. You could have people who would display similar phenotypical traits as other Africans to actually have Semitic ancestry. That's not impossible.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share about this before we close out?
To Christians watching this, if you know a Hebrew Israelite, which you're going to meet one. They're not just out on the corners. They're at your job more and more. They're in your family. It's going to, I think within 5 years, it's going to rival and surpass the Nation of Islam as the largest competitor in the city for the Christian church. I think that's almost certain. So you're going to meet them.
So you're saying take it seriously, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
I am saying take it seriously. And I'm also saying ask them what they believe. Find out what they believe.
In our study on apologetics, we're looking at a different false worldview or sect or really cult, you could call it this evening. It's a newer one that's been rising up more and more recently, called, what they like to call themselves the Hebrew Israelites. The Hebrew Israelites, or more familiarly known as the Black Hebrew Israelites, though they don't like being called that because, you can just keep that in your mind for conversation if you ever talk to one. They don't like being called that because that's basically redundant, because if you're a Hebrew and if you're an Israelite, you are black. But we'll be getting into that as we get into to what they believe. Really from this, they've been able to deceive a lot of people and grow to where there are many black Hebrew Israelite congregations throughout America, really mostly in larger cities is where you will see these predominantly. You can look at YouTube videos of them out on street corners where they will seek to call their black brothers and sisters to the truth, to the quote-unquote truth of who they are, calling them to understand that they are actually Israel, that they are God's people. In 2019, Lifeway did a poll amongst African Americans, and they found that 4% of black America considered themselves to be a black Hebrew Israelite. So 4% of black America considers themselves to hold to this teaching, which I know doesn't seem like much at first, but if you do the math, 4% of black America is a little over 1 million people. And so that's a good amount of people that are holding to this false teaching today. So it's an influence. I will say it's not an influence that I've ever engaged face to face, but it is an influence.
To discuss this very important topic that I know you specialize in, on the Hebrew Israelites, or the Black Hebrew Israelites, or Black Israelism. And I know that you've been involved in that work for quite a while.
From there, I started running into Hebrew Israelites on the corners and the areas where I lived, and I would always see them. So I began talking to them, and that led to doing stuff online as well. And I've been doing that ever since, and I'm glad to talk about Hebrew Israelism today.
Excellent. That's great. And you also have written a book on the Black Hebrew Israelites. Whether you like it or not, you are going to come across this group. So every time I visit New York with my wife, Manhattan, invariably we always run into them. And so they're in the subways, they're on the streets, they're in Times Square, they're everywhere. And so please try to become informed about this group. And so Vocab, the Black Hebrew Israelites, can you tell us a little bit about them? What exactly, who are they? Where did they come from? Where's their point of origin? And why do they refer to themselves as the Black Hebrew Israelites?
Not disputing here that there are black Jews, not arguing here that there are some tribes or groups in Africa that can claim legitimate Israelite descent, not arguing that. What's with these Hebrew Israelites, or these black Hebrew Israelites? For decades, I would see them on street corners in New York City. Oh, was it mid-90s or early 90s? I confronted them. If you're listening as a black Hebrew Israelite and you want to call me and challenge me on anything I said, great. And hopefully we can set up some formal debate. All that to say this. Black Hebrew Israelites claim that they are the original tribes of Israel. They claim that they are the original tribes of Israel. And one of the great proofs is they alone fulfill the curses in Deuteronomy 28. How long have you been interested in the Black Hebrew Israelites?
A friend first told me about them about 10 years ago. In the past 4 years, I've been focusing on them as a specific area of apologetic research.
And how influential have they been in some of our inner cities and in some of the African American and Hispanic communities?
Hebrew Israelism is becoming the new number one primary urban apologetic issue. It's not just in the inner cities. The internet creates a situation where now folks in rural areas, you know what I'm saying? In corners of very small cities, they're popping up all over, and in the UK and in the islands and even in Africa.
All right, so before we talk about origins, history, what's the appeal? I mean, if I'm just walking by as a bystander, I hear some people that seem very angry, yelling, and I don't hear much about hope and redemption and love, but obviously they have appeal, they're growing. In your view, what's their appeal?
Let me be sympathetic and play the role of a Hebrew Israelite.
Yeah.
We're angry? Of course we're angry. Look at what this country has done to our people for the past 400 years. We're angry? Of course we're angry. We're shot dead in the streets and there's no recompense. You think this country can just get away with that? You're angry? Of course we're angry. These politicians, they don't do anything. The church rips us off, doesn't teach us anything. It's just a game. It's just a show. They don't even teach us the Bible in there. Of course we're angry. And you know what? The prophets of old were angry. You think they put Jeremiah in a pit because he was such a nice guy? You think they tried to kill Paul because he was all smiles and flowers? Of course we're angry. Men of the Lord are always angry at injustice. Now, why aren't you angry? Maybe you're not a man of the Lord.
Well said. Well done. So they're appealing to that.
But the differences are significant, and I think they'll play into the growth and popularity of Hebrew Israelism in the years to come.
And do we have any idea of their size, how many congregations they have,
Yes.
things like that, and how best to reach Black Hebrew Israelites? Let's talk about origins. You mentioned Black Jews. There are certainly Black Jews. We know about Black Jewish communities. We know about Ethiopian Jews. We know about the Lemba tribe in Zimbabwe and different groups in Nigeria. So do Black Hebrew Israelites actually go back to Black Israelites legitimately in past history? He's focusing on this influential group. Just looked at a comment on our Facebook feed from a woman, Deoxy, who said that she met a Black Hebrew Israelite couple that were going to every Black community in Central America to spread their message. And
today we're talking about something that you've spent a great deal of time working on, which is Black Hebrew Israelites. And this is a particular group that I don't know as much about, but I've been asked about a lot and thought it'd be good to bring someone on who knows what's up to walk us through. Who are they, what they believe, how to interact with them, how to actually reach them and change minds, and to talk about why it matters. This particular group is concerning for a few different reasons. So, Vocab, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and then introduce us to the Black Hebrew Israelites? Like, who are they?
I found myself, for lack of a better phrase, out on the street talking to people, including the Hebrew Israelites. And so that's when I started really studying them more. The further I went, it seems like the ideology kept on growing and growing and growing. And so it was kind of a situation where we needed all hands on deck.
If you've never heard of the Hebrew Israelites or the Black Hebrew Israelites, like, what do we need to know 101?
The key thing is the ideology of Hebrew Israelism. And the essence of it is, if you're negatively impacted by the transatlantic slave trade, you might just be a true Israelite. That's the essence of Hebrew Israelism.
I think one of the questions that we're probably going to have in the audience right now is, wait, so are these Jews? Are these people Jewish? They're saying they're from Abraham's stock. So, you know, Hebrew Israelites is like a big umbrella. As far as the umbrella goes, how many people are we talking about, and how quickly is it growing as far as currently?
That's what's fascinating. 4% considered themselves to be a Black Hebrew Israelite. Now, 4% may not sound like much. So people are like, we don't got to worry about these guys. Ladies and gentlemen, 4% of Black America is 1.5 million people. It's about 1.5 million people who self-identify in some way as a Hebrew Israelite.
Yeah, I have seen them here.
4% is actually a big deal.
Yeah, I have seen them out here in Long Beach. Not recently. Those are Hebrew Israelites. Like, you could just tell.
Now,
take me back like 30 years, from 30 years ago, 1991, like, how many were there then in the U.S.? Because it seems like I'd never heard of this before.
And once they learned how to use YouTube to promote their doctrine, it was on. And then sort of in the modern era, like the last 10 years, where there's been kind of heightened tension and a lot of these things really resurfaced in a more ferocious way in our cities.
Oh, yeah.
Hebrew Israelism seems to have benefited positively from that and exploded the past 10 years, especially. Even in my own city, I've seen them go from one corner to like 10 corners just in the past 5 years. And so we are talking about exponential growth. And that's why, people, they don't want to take it serious, but so you better watch out.
Yeah, you don't even have to sell me on this. I'm so on the same page. So they're growing significantly. Are the Hebrew Israelites pretty much, the people who are part of the movement, are they pretty much all like Black people? Or is there a variety that's within there? Or is, like, if a white person came and said, I'd like to join the group, what does that look like?